War is hell, but some weapons of war make it even worse. To that end, the international community has attempted to curtail the use of the most heinous weapons in existence. The trouble is that there are so many different treaties banning the most destructive weapons of war, and many different countries simply have not signed these treaties. These are 10 illegal weapons of war. Strangely enough, there is no international law that specifically bans the most destructive and undiscriminating weapon of war, the nuclear bomb. Treaties such as the Strategic Arms Limitations Treaties and the Non-Proliferation Treaty limit which nations can possess nuclear weapons, but nothing under international law can stop their use. However, there have been inquiries into whether the use of nuclear weapons violates other treaties, such as treaties that generally restrict the use of weapons which cause mass civilian casualties. Even those debates, however, are ongoing and inconclusive, in part due to the influence of countries that possess nuclear weapons. Still, nuclear weapons and their use are banned in all but spirit. The issue of landmines in war has resulted in an incalculable amount of human suffering and international deadlock. There has been a protracted battle in international courts to ban anti-personnel landmines, which the Ottawa Treaty of 1997 does prohibit, but the United States is one of 35 countries to not sign the Ottawa Treaty. However, landmines used by the United States Army self-detonate after a short amount of time, so that they are never left behind after U.S. forces have ceased operations in an area. Normal landmines, however, pose long-term threats to local civilians because active mines can lurk beneath the surface for decades after a conflict has ended. It has been calculated that abandoned minefields have killed or crippled more than 1 million civilians over the past century. The sad thing is that the Ottawa Treaty does not cover the use of anti-tank mines, but these only pose a threat to civilian vehicles, as the weight of a person could not trigger an anti-tank mine. Either way, international treaties on landmines are far from comprehensive in scope and in their reach. What's worse than stepping on a landmine? Stepping on a landmine, being rushed to a hospital, and then learning that the doctors trying to save your life can't find the deadly shrapnel lodged in your body, even with X-ray imaging. Explosives with plastic fragments have been banned because they make it impossible for even the most experienced doctors to save the lives of their victims. Stepping on a plastic fragmentation landmine is an almost guaranteed death sentence, and the United Nations Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons thankfully classifies the use of these insidious weapons as a crime against humanity. The very first treaty on the use of firearms, while they were still in their most primitive form, was the 1675 Strasbourg Agreement, which prohibited the use of poison bullets. You would wonder why this treaty was a necessity, as the purpose of rounds fired from a gun is that they are intended to kill an enemy without the use of elaborate poisons. Early firearms weren't terribly accurate, so armies in both Asia and Europe would cover bullets in poison or hazardous biological substances such as a rotting carcass to increase the chance of a successful hit resulting in a fatality. This centuries-old ban on poison rounds is still in effect to this day. Mustard gas is practically synonymous with illegal weapons of war. Used liberally by both sides in the First World War, this heavier-than-air gas would cling to the ground after it was deployed, flooding trenches filled with enemy soldiers. Victims of mustard gas would have their lungs filled with fluid, effectively drowning them. Survivors of mustard gas would face severe burns to exposed skin on their bodies and faces, as well as potential blindness. Treaties signed after the First World War banned the use of all chemical weapons, including mustard gas. Strangely enough, though, chemical weapons had already been banned by the Hague Conventions of 1899 and 1907. However, both the Allies and the Central Powers chose to ignore the ban during World War I. For the most part, militaries around the world have kept their promise to never use mustard gas. Non-state actors, such as Islamic State militants and Sudanese insurgents on the other hand, have used mustard gas against their enemies on multiple occasions in recent years. The international ban against chemical weapons extends to riot control agents such as tear gas and pepper gas as well. Even though these chemical agents are non-lethal, they do impede the ability to breathe, which is used as a litmus test to determine whether or not a weapon is a prohibited chemical weapon. As with hollow point bullets, there is no limit on the use of these agents outside of the battlefield. This ironically means that tear gas and pepper sprays cannot be used against Islamic State militants, as that would be a violation of their human rights, but is perfectly acceptable to deploy against peaceful civilian demonstrators in Western nations. Nerve agents also fall under the category of chemical weapons and are thus outlawed by international treaty. These toxins cripple a target's nervous system so that it is unable to send life-sustaining signals to their body. If you were ever exposed to a nerve agent, you would first develop a runny nose and tightness in your chest. Soon after, you would have difficulty breathing. As you lost control of your bodily functions, you would involuntarily salivate and vomit. Death would finally come after this point, but only thanks to a complete respiratory failure. The effects of nerve agents are long-lasting and increase with continued exposure. Survivors of nerve agent poisoning almost invariably suffer chronic neurological damage. Sarin is the most well-known of the nerve agents, but the lesser-known venomous agent X, or VX, is by far the most deadly. 10 milligrams, the equivalent of several grains of sand, ingested or absorbed through the skin, is enough to kill a person. Unsurprisingly, using nerve agents in any conflict is a serious war crime. The deliberate spreading of deadly infectious diseases is also banned by international treaties. If two nations were to ever find themselves in a conflict, the international community and other neutral countries would prefer precision when conducting military operations, so that collateral damage is minimized. Chemical and biological weapons are contrary to that expectation. Once a target has been infected with a deadly disease, it is difficult, if not impossible, to control how that disease will spread to other countries. The international community's greatest fear is that an out-of-control contagion could easily spread into civilian areas, even if they were not the original target. If these rules of war had been around hundreds of years earlier, you might have seen medieval generals charged with war crimes, as one siege tactic was to catapult rotting carcasses into a besieged castle to spread disease among its defenders. The Empire of Japan was the most recent state actor to violate this convention of war, as they frequently used biological weapons against the Chinese and even once attempted to send over strains of the bubonic plague to the continental United States through the use of balloons. While flamethrowers are technically a banned weapon of war, this ban is only a partial one. Legally, countries can still use flamethrowers on military personnel from foreign armies. What they can't do is use flamethrowers against civilians or in areas where civilians are likely to be affected. Many countries, including the United States, have voluntarily ended the use of flamethrowers due to the horrendous damage they can inflict. Burning to death is widely considered an inhumane way to die, so many nations have joined the United States in the sentiment. Other nations, such as North Korea, continue to use flamethrowers with little consequence. It has even been reported that the flamethrower is a preferred method of execution in North Korea, which is in clear violation of international law. The Hague Convention of 1899 outlawed the use of hollow point bullets in a time many of us didn't even know hollow point bullets existed. Hollow point bullets are designed to inflict the maximum amount of damage inside a human body. How this works is that hollow point bullets expand and often remain inside the target's body, causing fatal internal injuries. As with some of the other items on this list, international laws apply only to acts of war. Each country is free to make its own laws regarding the use of hollow point bullets for target shooting, home protection, police actions, and more. For more top lists just like this, be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already, and don't forget to check out our other lists. And thanks for watching, and thanks for learning.